Hello there. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever the time of the day it is from wherever you are viewing or listening to this channel. It's a heart like Esther's. I have a heart like Esther's. That's who I am. This channel is about my story time or my story. It's a story time channel about my story, excuse me, and how God saved me from the demise by the powers of witchcraft and a destiny swap. And some may, wonder why I don't get to that part immediately because it's a story that I'm sharing. So I'm not there yet. But if you listen to the story, you'll see how I kept getting through all these obstacles, and it was only God who did it. It's only Him who could do it. So, I am on my previous video, I spoke about my time in Miami, how that spirit, that kept jumping from body to body. I couldn't remember the name of that spirit that was in the movie, The Matrix. I think he was called Agent Smith, and it's a real thing. It's spiritual. So if you are in your Bible and you know about the spiritual realm, you will understand where I'm going with this. I had a hard time, figuring it out in the beginning because I didn't understand it. I didn't know what I was experiencing at that time. I just knew that it wasn't natural, it was supernatural. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about the sins, through the bloodline and how it moves through generations that are known as generational curses. So I'm just going to tap in a little bit about my background because I believe the Holy Spirit was leading me to do that. So you'll get a better understanding because my life wasn't all that peachy and cream. It had to be an open door for me to even be chosen to break this generational curse or to experience the things that I was going through. The enemy don't attack just anyone, because if he has you already, he's not concerned about you. But if he see that you are, reading your Bible, you are strengthening your relationship with the Lord, and, you are wanting to, hear his voice and not be led by the enemy. So I spent most of my life as a loner. I often felt like an outcast. In my late teens and early adulthood, I knew a lot of people, many, many people, but only a few were my true friends. I eventually realized that I didn't fit in with the crowd, the circle that I was running with, feeling a little inadequate compared to their standards of beauty and social economic status. And this happens today in the world. These kids are out here doing anything just to follow the Joneses and for these material items. And I grew up in a single parent household with limited resources like many of us. My mother left the state where I was born after her and my father divorced, and I was around 12 or 13 years old. And that's when she moved back to her home state of Atlanta, Georgia. We frequently moved around and sometimes lived with other family members. And I'm sharing this just to explain why it was crucial for me to make something of myself and why I believe, that I was meant to break the generational curse when I figured it all out. And so many people, we avoid discussing our past and, those family secrets that no one talk about due to the fear of judgment. And this contributes to the struggles we in the Black community especially face and healing from our, childhood trauma. So in my late teens, I I felt I had no potential after I became pregnant, and this was like the beginning of my journey as a single mother and homelessness. As I navigated, my future alone, I found myself working in the adult entertainment industry. Yeah, I was a stripper, and I was caught in difficult situations at times. I didn't realize that God had a plan for me, though. I didn't know Him or His teachings at the time. No one guided me to understand His word or His promises and what that meant for me and my baby boy at the time. I was moving through life on my own and not realizing that, all this stuff that I was chasing, success, marriage, you know, land ownership, leadership, and when I say land, home ownership, they were already meant for me. I just didn't realize that. I just needed to align myself with the Lord and my true purpose. I know I was destined to do great things. And I was always serving others already. I didn't have much, but I always did for other people. It was just my nature, still to this day. And I did that when I was trying to find my way while still trying to achieve my goals. My son used to bring all, his friends that he would call his brothers, to my house. I would take the men, until we figured some things out about, what I needed to do to help them get on their paths and figure out their situations. And so, yeah, but when I was doing all this, the funny thing is, I still didn't recognize that like this was part of my purpose. And I was just simply doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing. Um, and I had I had accomplished a lot of things that like many in my family hadn't accomplished. Such as traveling around the world, pursuing higher education, and maintaining some good credit scores. That was like a thing, for me because I saw a lot of people in my family always struggling. They could never get anything in their name. It was a big thing. And even with my mother, like there were times it was difficult for her because of her credit scores. And so in my mind as a kid, I always knew that I was going to, pay my bills on time, be responsible, and do the right thing so I can. And I would research this stuff, ask questions from other people about this. And I swear I implemented this into my life, when I started working and I moved away from that lifestyle. I would pay my bills like months in advance, even including my rent, because I was I was homeless. I was sleeping, place to place at times, and I never wanted to revisit that ever again. So yeah, although I hadn't reached the point of home ownership yet, I was still very content. I was living in New York City. Everybody lives in the apartment buildings there. You may have the brownstones, and people still rent those. Not everybody are homeowners. But as I grew older and like from my times of, traveling around, I didn't know if I wanted to continue to live in America anymore. So that wasn't a big deal for me. However, you know, while doing all these things, I was always minding my own business and enjoying my life as it is, and free of the toxicity that I came from. So in my early 20s and my late teens, I always was faced with betrayal. I never knew why, because I never did anything to cause these things. It just, I would, people would switch up on me, and this is the way it's been all my entire life. And one of my good friends that I thought was my good friend. She stranded me in another state. Her and I used to travel a lot, and we was always attracting these hustlers type of guys and drug dealers. And she was dating one of the biggest, well-known drug dealers in New York City, and he is like a big sensation on YouTube these days because he recently just came home from serving like a shitload of time. Excuse my language, but he didn't like me because he wanted to sleep with me, and I was loyal to her. I wasn't going to do that for no amount of money or no car or anything. I was a good friend, but our mutual friends would do that to her, and she was friends with them but like would switch up on me, and that back then I couldn't. In 30 years, she never even tried to see if I was still alive, never even reached out to my mother, my family, anybody, And I ran into, well, we crossed paths when I moved back home after 30 years back to Atlanta. But despite those challenges, and among many others, I still survived, you know. I even been shot inadvertently. The bullet wasn't meant for me, but I'm just trying to paint a picture of the things that I've been through at such a, in my young life at that time. And uh, the state where I was abandoned, it actually became my home for the 30 years, and that was New York City, New York State. So, and it allowed me to evolve. I met a lot of great people, who truly supported me and, showed me the ropes. And it made me want to really get my life on track. So, this is where I started my journey. I continued school to my higher education, earned a master's degree, and yeah, I was good, and I was like my future I thought was set. So, but each experience, whether it was good or bad, um, it shaped me to who I am today. But as I grew older, and I understood what true friendships and partnerships look like. I realized that I couldn't really call those people from my past, even some of my relatives, my friends. I noticed that when I relocated back, that many of them harbored resentment toward me for no real reason. I understand that. And they kept reaching out because they were hearing I was back in town. And I'm like, I go out to lunch or dinner and I get to feel this energy. And I'm like, why are they, trying to connect with me if they don't really like me? And I'm trying to figure out 30 years, was there something that I did or said, because I was willing to right my wrongs and let's move forward, but couldn't think of anything. So, but I just noticed that a lot of them were like trying to publicly highlight all my failures, and it was stuff from the past, and but quietly dismissing, my current successes. And so I just disconnected and just observed from a distance. I wouldn't even answer my phones anymore and try to memorize numbers so that I can block them. But this brings me back to the time when I moved back. I just really realized that a lot of people, in addition to my family, wanted to see me as my past self, stuck in where I came from, and I wasn't searching for any validation. Um, but you know they didn't even acknowledge the new version of me. They didn't like it. In fact, they didn't even want to see it because the new version represented a person that overcame all their obstacles that were placed in my path since the day I was born, because I believe that I was chosen before the womb for something greater, because it even goes deeper than, the stripper adult entertainment scene. When I was a child, I was my mother. I come from a narcissistic family, and now I know and understand what it is. We didn't call it that back then. We didn't call it anything. Maybe mental illness or something like that, bipolar or whatever. But yeah, I was a very depressed kid, and shifting around, it seems like nobody wanted me. And I was no bother to anyone. I was actually incredibly helpful or wanted to be of some help. But I just didn't feel like I belonged. And so that's why it wasn't difficult for me to like relocate and disconnect, because I always felt disconnected when I was connected, if you get my drift. So I, uh, I know I wasn't meant to make it this far. And there was forces before the current witchcraft situation that wanted to keep me trapped in a sinful lifestyle. I know all of this ties into the generational curse. These devils, these demons, they start fighting you when you are trying to get off path with, what Satan want you to be or where he wants you to be so that he can take your soul. I was fornicating. I guess I was promiscuous because I participated in the adult entertainment scene to provide for me and my son. So, I didn't have a lot of boyfriends. I I was just a kid then, doing what I thought, I was supposed to do. I didn't know any better. When I got introduced to this, I was 17 years old. And I'm 16 when they were grooming me. This was the environment I was familiar with: the drug dealers, the strippers, the hustlers, whether that was, boosters, the drug traffickers, whatever it was, the number runners. I, was around it. I saw it. I was introduced to this lifestyle, when I was taken in by a stripper, so around my way, back then we used to go to the skate ring. That was the thing. And so a lot of them used to hang around. But one of the girls that she used to be one of the boosters in the neighborhood, or and around the way, and I knew her, she knew me, but they didn't see me outside often. They saw me out there late in the park, and she was just curious, like, why am I seeing you out here? But I confided in her to let her know that I didn't have anywhere to go. And her sister was a stripper and had her own place, and she took me in. And I'm grateful because it could have been worse. But not one time did this lady ever say, well, she was a lady to me because she was much older, but she was just not that much older, but old enough to be on her own. Not one time did she say, hey, let's get you, situated and prepared to continue school. They were grooming me to get on the stage, get the fake ID and learn how to walk in high heels and all of this stuff. So my childhood friendships and acquaintances, I'm noticing that like they struggle to let go of the past. Their only interest to connect with me in the first place was to like stir up trouble. They were gossipers, and it just became clear that none of these connections were genuine. So like I said, I disconnected myself. I just distanced myself, and you know, just left that alone. Haven't been alone on my own for so long, all my life actually. Because you look back now and imagine a young girl, 15, 16 years old, on out in I couldn't even phantom that, like when I have myself being out, you're not a, you don't have the mindset to be a grown up. It's horrible, and I hate to see children out here like that. It breaks my heart because it takes me back down memory lane, So I am, because being alone, I was never codependent, on anyone or anything, because I knew people could switch up in a heartbeat. So I always got my own, no matter how. I didn't hurt anybody, and I didn't do anything to land me behind bars, but I, you know, was doing things I wasn't supposed to do. And I'm not proud of. God forgave me for, that. And that was the stripping thing. I, transactional relationships with men. So, um, luckily I didn't get anything out of that too, because even with protection things happen. But I am, glory be to God, and this glory goes to God all, alone, because he got me through all of that. And even with the drugs that comes with the you know that scene, was plenty drinks, alcoholic beverages, cocaine, and I had my share. It was mostly drinking. I did lines of cocaine, smoked marijuana, and just to fit in. It was the early 80s. I'm talking about 80, 81, 82, 83, you know. Yeah, but I'm just like, again, glory be to God that I didn't, I wasn't didn't have that kind of addictive mindset. Like I didn't even really like it. Marijuana, maybe drinking, soothed all the thoughts that was, taking place in my head and my mind. But once I left that state, and I moved away from that lifestyle, I moved away from all of that stuff. It wasn't hard for me to not, um, you know, do any of that anymore. But yeah, my mother, she was a narcissist, and she wasn't a protector or a provider. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been in that situation. But yeah, she was um, in competition with me rather than supporting me. And I noticed this behavior around the ages of 12 or 15, when, like, I was now just her, I and my two younger siblings. My brother stayed back in Detroit with my dad, so I had to grow up really fast. So I'm gonna leave it right here because it's getting ready to cut off, and I'm gonna come back in another video and finish this story. Okay? Thank you, thank you, thank you for your patience. Give me a moment.